The real reason you still can't speak fluently. You do not struggle to speak English because you are bad at English. You struggle because your mind freezes faster than your mouth can move. And if you do not understand that, you will keep doing what most beginners do, watching more videos, learning more vocabulary, reading more grammar, and still feeling stuck the moment it is time to actually speak. If you have ever said, "I understand English, but I can't speak it. I know the words, but they don't come out," or, "In my head, I sound better than I do out loud," then this video is for you. Because today, I want to show you something very important. Fluency is not just a language problem. It is a mind problem, a mouth problem, and a training problem. And once you understand the difference, everything starts changing. In this video, I am going to show you 5 simple steps for beginners to train your mind and your mouth to speak English more fluent. But more importantly, I am going to show you why most people stay trapped for years even when they are studying. And somewhere in this video, I am going to share one shift that can instantly reduce your hesitation when you speak, and one practice that feels harder at first, but actually works better than just repeating after someone. So do not just listen to this video casually, because if you really understand what I am about to say, you will stop seeing yourself as someone trying to learn English and start training as someone who actually speaks it. Let's get into it. The comfort trap. Why your English stays in your head. Most people think they need more English, more words, more grammar, more tips, more motivation, more confidence, but that is not the real issue. The real issue is this. Your English is living in a comfort zone. You are reading without speaking, listening without responding, watching without repeating, studying without retrieving, understanding without expressing. And the brain loves that because comfort feels safe. But fluency is not built in safety. Fluency is built in friction. Let me explain. A lot of beginners live in what I call passive English mode. They consume English, they recognize English, they even enjoy English, but they do not produce enough English under pressure. And that creates a dangerous illusion. You start believing that because something looks familiar, it belongs to you. But recognition is not fluency. Understanding is not expression. Exposure is not control. This is why you can watch a 10-minute English video and understand 70% of it, but still panic when someone asks you, "So, tell me about your day," because input and output are not the same skill. And if you only train one side, the other side stays weak. That is why real fluency practice has to include not just input, but output-focused language, work, and fluency training. In other words, hearing the language is not enough. You must retrieve it, shape it, and deliver it. And this is where most beginners lose years, because they keep feeding the brain information, without training the brain to pull that information back out when it matters. And in a moment, I am going to show you why that one mistake changes everything. Why your brain. Now, let's talk about the mind. Because when people say, "I can't speak English," what they often mean is not "I know nothing." What they really mean is, when it is time to speak, my mind goes blank. I start overthinking. I get nervous. I translate too much. I judge myself. I lose the sentence halfway through. That is not just a vocabulary issue. That is your automatic brain taking over. When you try to speak, 2 things often happen, almost at the same time. First, your fast automatic mind reacts. What if I say it wrong? What if they laugh? What if I forget the word? What if my pronunciation is bad? What if I sound stupid? Then the slower conscious part of your mind arrives later and tries to help. But very often, it does not challenge the fear. It joins it. So instead of saying, "Relax, just speak," it says, "Yeah, your grammar is weak. Yeah, your accent is embarrassing. Yeah, maybe you should wait until you are more ready." And just like that, you stop. This is why so many English learners think they have a discipline problem, when in reality, they have an avoidance problem. You are not lazy. You are avoiding emotional discomfort, and that is a huge difference. Because once you see that clearly, you stop making the wrong diagnosis. The problem is not that you need to become fearless before you speak. The problem is that you have believed your first fearful thought every time speaking becomes uncomfortable. That thought is not truth. It is conditioning. It is an old pattern trying to keep you safe. And that pattern says, stay quiet, stay hidden, stay correct. Do not risk being seen learning in public. But fluency does not come from hiding. It comes from surviving enough speaking moments that your brain finally learns. Oh, this is not dangerous. This is just growth. That is when everything starts to shift. The fluency myth that keeps beginners stuck. Here's one of the biggest lies beginners believe. One day, when I know enough English, I will start speaking. No. Speaking is not the result of fluency. Speaking is the road to fluency. And if you wait to feel ready, you can easily waste the next 2 years preparing to do the thing that would have started helping you from day one. Let me say this as clearly as possible. You do not become fluent and then start speaking. You start speaking and then become fluent. That is why speaking English is more like driving, swimming, or playing an instrument than like memorizing a textbook. You can study the rules forever, but skill only grows when you perform the skill. And this matters because your mouth also needs training. A lot of learners think English is only mental. It is not. English is physical. Your tongue has to move differently. Your lips have to shape sounds differently. Your jaw has to relax differently. Your rhythm has to change. Your breathing has to support longer phrases. Your ears have to catch patterns faster. So when you say, I know it, but I can't say it, that makes perfect sense. Because knowledge in the brain is not the same as automatic movement in the mouth. Your mouth needs reps. Your ear needs reps. Your nervous system needs reps. Your identity needs reps. And here is where it gets really interesting. Some practice feels easier, but teaches you less. Some practice feels harder, but builds fluency faster. And that brings us to step 1. Step 1, train your identity first, not just your vocabulary. Before we talk about mouth exercises, pronunciation drills, or conversation practice, we have to talk about identity. Because if your identity is still, I am bad at speaking, I always freeze, I am shy in English, my pronunciation is terrible, I can only understand, not speak, then every practice session becomes a performance of that identity, and your brain will keep collecting evidence to prove it. This is one of the biggest mindset shifts you need to make. Stop identifying as someone who is trying to speak English someday. Start identifying as someone who is building spoken English. Now, that sounds small, but it changes everything. A person who says, I am just not good at languages. The first person expects mistakes. The second person takes mistakes. Personally, the first person hears an awkward sentence and says, good, that is one more rep. The second person hears an awkward sentence and says, see, I knew I was bad. That is why beginners need to stop treating every mistake like proof of failure. A mistake is not a verdict. It is a repetition. And repetition is what rewires you. So from today, your new internal language should sound more like this. I am training fluency. I am allowed to sound like a beginner while becoming advanced. My pauses are temporary. My mouth is learning new movements. My brain is building faster access. Every speaking rep makes English more automatic. Do you see what is happening here? You are no longer begging English to accept you. You are training yourself to become the kind of person for whom speaking English is normal. And once that identity becomes normal, your actions stop feeling forced. But identity alone is not enough. Because if your mouth has not been trained, Your confidence will collapse the moment you open it. So now we go physical. Step 2, train your mouth like an athlete, not like a student. This is where most beginners underestimate the process. They think fluency is about knowing the right, but sometimes the real issue is that your mouth cannot yet move through English smoothly at speed. And that is why recording yourself is so powerful. Yes, it feels uncomfortable. Yes, your voice may sound strange. Yes, you may notice every weakness. But that is exactly why it works. When you record yourself, you do 3 things at once. First, you make English physical. Second, you hear what is really happening instead of what you imagine is happening. Third, you create a loop of awareness, correction, and repetition. And that matters, because speaking a new language is a physical workout for your mouth. You are literally training muscles, timing, sound transitions, and rhythm. So here is what I want you to do. Choose one short piece of English audio, 20 to 40 seconds. It could be from a YouTube clip, a podcast, an interview, or a graded listening source. Listen to it once for meaning, then listen again for sound, then say it aloud. But do not only repeat mechanically. Notice where the speaker stresses words, where the voice rises and falls, where words connect, where pauses happen, how phrases are chunked together. Because strong pronunciation is not just about individual sounds. It also includes word stress, sentence stress, intonation, and chunk. That means fluent English does not sound like word by word by word. It sounds like connected thought. For example, instead of saying I/want/to/talk/about/my/weekend, fluent speech often groups it more like, I want to talk about my weekend. The words live in chunks. And if you train chunks, your speaking speed improves much faster than if you try to build every sentence one word at a time. This is why one of the smartest things a beginner can do is stop memorizing isolated words and start collecting sentence frames. Useful chunks, conversation starters, opinion phrases, transition phrases, everyday reactions, like, the reason I say that is, what I mean is, to be honest, at first. But then, the main problem is, from my point of view, these chunks reduce decision fatigue. Your brain no longer has to build everything from zero. And that brings us to one of the most underrated practices in fluency training. And this is where most people finally understand why just repeat after me is not enough. Step 3. Use harder practice that builds faster fluency. Here is something fascinating. A lot of speaking practice feels good because it is easy. You hear a sentence, you repeat it. It sounds okay, you feel confident. But confidence during practice is not always proof that deep learning is happening. Sometimes the easier practice only helps in the moment. What helps more in the long run is often slightly harder. This is where retrieval practice becomes powerful. Instead of always hearing the correct sentence first, pause. Look at the idea, picture, topic, or keyword. Try to say it yourself first. Then listen to the correct version. Then compare. Then repeat. That tiny change matters. Why? Because when you try to pull language out of memory before you hear it, your brain works harder, and that effort strengthens learning. In pronunciation learning too, practice that forces you to attempt first can outperform pure imitation over time. So yes, imitation has value. But if all you ever do is echo perfectly after a speaker, you may become dependent on the model. The moment the model disappears, so does your fluency. That is why I want you to use a better sequence. Attempt, hear, correct, repeat, reuse. Let me say that again. Attempt first, then hear the model, then correct yourself, then repeat it. Then reuse it in your own sentence. This is one of the fastest ways to move from borrowed English to owned English. Now let's talk about one of the best tools for this, shadowing. Shadowing means you listen to a speaker and repeat almost immediately, like an echo, just behind the audio. This helps with rhythm, prosody, mouth agility, listening speed, and flow. But do not do lazy shadowing. Do smart shadowing. Here is a simple shadowing ladder. Listen once for meaning. Read and listen together. Shadow slowly. Shadow at natural speed. Pause and summarize in your own words. That last part matters, because if you only copy, you improve mimicry. If you copy and then transform, you improve fluency. So after shadowing a sentence like, honestly, I used to feel really nervous speaking English, you should then make your own. Honestly, I used to feel nervous talking to strangers. Honestly, I used to hesitate before every answer. Honestly, I still get nervous, but now I speak anyway. That is how structure becomes yours. Now you are not only repeating language, you are building a speaking system. And once you understand this, you stop chasing more content and start training more intelligently. But fluency still does not happen if your life is too noisy. And that is the next problem. Step 4. Reduce noise so your English brain can wake up. Most people are overstimulated, always scrolling, always consuming, always switching tabs, always translating, always distracted. And when your attention is fractured, your English stays fractured too, because fluency requires recall. Recall requires attention, and attention dies in overstimulation. This is why some learners study for hours and still feel foggy. They are not training deeply. They are just exposing themselves repeatedly while mentally scattered. So I want you to add what I call sensory and cognitive friction back into your learning. That means creating small moments where your brain actually has to work without instant rescue. For example, listen once without subtitles before turning them on. Speak for 1 minute before checking a dictionary. Describe a picture without translating every word. Sit in silence and explain your day out loud. Journal in simple English after a conversation. Retell what you watched from memory instead of rewatching immediately. Do you see the pattern? You are not making learning harder for no reason. You are removing crutches, so your real ability can come online. Because when your phone, subtitles, translation app, and notes are always doing the work, your brain never fully develops the strength to do it alone. And that is the hidden cost of convenience. Comfort makes you feel capable. Friction makes you become capable. This is also why listening matters so much. A good speaker is not just someone who talks a lot. A good speaker hears rhythm, phrasing, stress, and response patterns. If you want to sound more fluent, you need to feed your brain spoken English that is understandable, repeatable, useful for your level, rich in real phrases, not random advanced content that overwhelms you. And here is a rule beginners should never forget. Do not listen just to understand the message. Listen to steal the music, steal the rhythm, steal the stress, steal the sentence shape, steal the pauses, steal the way ideas are connected. Because fluency is not only vocabulary, it is timing. And if your timing changes, your speech changes faster than you think. But even then, one final problem remains. You can do all the solo practice in the world and still freeze with real people. Which means the last step is the one most learners avoid the longest. Step 5. Add social friction, real people, real pressure, real growth. If you truly want to speak English fluently, at some point, English has to leave your private practice world and enter human interaction. This is where everything becomes real. Because a real conversation does not wait for perfect grammar. It does not follow your study plan. It moves. And yes, that can feel terrifying. But it is also one of the fastest teachers you will ever have. Why? Because real conversation forces you to listen and respond, tolerate imperfection, recover after mistakes, simplify when needed, ask follow-up questions, notice gaps, stay present. In other words, it trains the exact thing you actually want, spontaneous communication. And if you are a beginner, do not make this dramatic. You do not need to give speeches. You do not need to debate politics. You do not need to sound advanced. You need short, real, repeatable speaking moments. That could mean a language exchange call, a speaking partner, a tutor session, voice notes with a friend, an online speaking club, short daily self. Introductions, asking and answering 5 basic questions every day. And here's a huge tip. Do not enter conversations trying to prove how much English you know. Enter conversations trying to keep the interaction alive. That changes your focus completely. Now, instead of obsessing over being perfect, you start focusing on asking one more question. Giving one more example. Reacting naturally, staying in the moment. Keeping the rhythm of communication moving. That is fluency. Not perfection, not fancy vocabulary, not a perfect accent. Fluency is the ability to keep meaning moving. And the more social reps you get, the less your brain interprets speaking as a threat. Remember what we said earlier, your mind learns safety through experience. Every time you speak and survive, the fear loses authority. Every time you speak and stay present, your identity strengthens. Every time you speak imperfectly and still connect, your brain updates the story. And eventually, something beautiful happens. You stop saying, "Can I speak English?" And you start asking, "How can I say this more clearly?" That is a completely different level. That is not fear anymore. That is refinement. And refinement only begins after repetition. So let's bring this all together. If you want to train your mind and mouth to speak English fluently, here are your 5 simple steps. Step 1. Shift your identity. Stop saying, "I can't speak English." Start saying, "I am building spoken English every day." Your brain follows the story you repeat. Step 2. Train your mouth physically. Read aloud. Record yourself. Copy stress, intonation, rhythm, and chunking. Speaking is a mouth skill, not. Step 3. Use effortful practice. Do not only repeat after audio. Try first, then listen, then correct, then repeat. Use shadowing and retrieval practice together. Step 4. Reduce overstimulation. Use less passive scrolling and more active recall. Turn input into output. Retell, summarize, speak, and retrieve. Step 5. Add social friction. Speak with real people in small, consistent ways. Real fluency grows when English becomes interaction, not just study. Now, if you want a simple daily structure, here is one 20-minute beginner fluency routine. 5 minutes. Listen to short English audio. 5 minutes. Shadow and copy the speaker. 5 minutes. Speak from memory without looking. 3 minutes. Record yourself summarizing. 2 minutes. Say the same idea again. More clearly, that is it. Not 3 hours, not 10 apps, not 50 tabs, not endless theory. And if you do that consistently, your speaking will change. Not because magic happened, not because one day you suddenly became talented, but because your brain got faster, your mouth got looser, your ear got sharper, and your identity stopped fighting your growth. Final mindset shift. Your first thought is not your fluency level. Before I close, I want to leave you with this. When you try to speak English, your first thought may still be, "I'm nervous. I might mess this up. I don't know enough. I'm not ready." That first thought is not your fluency level. It is just an old pattern. The question is not, "What did I feel first?" The real question is, "What do I choose next? Do I stay silent or do I try? Do I judge myself or do I train? Do I keep hiding in passive learning or do I step into the discomfort that actually changes me?" Because your future English is not being built by the words you understand quietly. It is being built by the words you are willing to struggle through out loud. And yes, at first you may sound slow. At first you may pause. At first your pronunciation may feel heavy. At first your sentences may feel small. That is fine. Small spoken English is still spoken English. Slow spoken English is still spoken English. Imperfect spoken English is still progress. You do not need to sound impressive. You need to sound consistent. And if you stay consistent, fluency stops being this mysterious thing other people have. It becomes the natural result of how you train. So from this point on, do not ask, how do I speak perfect English? Ask, how do I become the kind of person who speaks even before perfection? That is the real beginning, because the learners who win are not always the smartest. They are usually the ones who stop worshiping comfort. They speak before they feel fully ready. They retrieve before they are fully certain. They record before they feel fully confident. They repeat before they feel fully fluent. And because they do, their mind adapts, their mouth adapts, and eventually, their identity adapts. That is how fluency is built. Not in theory, in reps. Not in comfort, in friction. Not in waiting, in speaking. So train the mind, train the mouth, train the identity, and let the results catch up. Because one day, if you keep going, you will open your mouth and English will come out more naturally than you expected. And when that happens, you will realize something. You were never as far away as you thought. You just needed the right kind of training.